This is Democracy,
a podcast that explores the interracial, intergenerational, and intersectional
unheard voices living in the world's most influential democracy.
All right. Well, welcome to our show. We're here today for a new episode of This is Democracy. We're very fortunate today to have two of the leading lights of Austin schools and the University of Texas with us. We have with us today Sophie Wysocki, who is a senior at the Liberal Arts and Science Academy here in Austin, which is one of our magnet schools here. And we also have Meena Anderson, who is a first-year journalism student at the University of Texas, Austin, and a graduate from the Liberal Arts and Science Academy here in Austin. Before we get to our discussion today about democracy and student life and making democracy among students in schools, we have a poem from Zachary, of course. Zachary, what are you going to read to us today?
It's a poem that It's a poem that I first wrote like 2 years ago, but I really heavily edited it and basically changed the whole poem. And it's called If I'm Lost.
Great. Well, let's hear it.
When the first sparrow sounded forth his voice and passed it through the very breath of every living sparrow until someone could hear a bird sing in every corner, did he know it was everlasting? When the first poet put pen to paper and wrote the first eulogy to love, compounding the human voice into words that sunk through the heart of every soul until one could hear a sonnet in every sandstorm and every stream, did he know it was for all mankind? When the first man set foot on the still surface of the moon and left the first footprint, when he had to take all of humanity and speak for it in one single step until a human voice could be seen forever on the untouchable surface of the moon, did he know it was to never be forgotten? When one stands up and shouts to the wind, does it really sound forever without a TV camera? Does holding a sign against the scorching sun, does it last if no one sees it? Do we really know enough to stand up, to raise our voice without a megaphone? Did the first man ever to wander, to blaze the first trail, ever have to wonder if he was lost?
Wow. So what's the imagery of being lost in this poem?
I don't know. I just think it's more about like not knowing what like the best way to be heard is, and not sure if there's a way to know beforehand or
Right.
if you just know afterwards.
So you sort of figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's a perfect transition to our guests today, Sophie and Meena. Both of you are very involved, I know, in all kinds of student activities and are very concerned about getting students involved and helping to improve our democracy. Sophie, how do you come to these issues? How do you think about them?
Well, throughout my life, I feel very privileged and very sheltered and kind of not having to experience a lot of the prejudice and discrimination that a lot of people have faced. And I've seen some of that firsthand through like my friends or people I know, and a lot of it I've seen through the media or the news. And because of that, I just have felt like a call to action almost, where I feel like if I don't do something, then I'm not fulfilling my purpose to help others. And by participating in different kind of events or activities that raise awareness and call for participation in politics, I feel like I'm fulfilling that purpose and helping others.
Well, it sounds like you feel a sense of duty. Mm-hmm. What are some of the activities you're involved in?
Well, in terms of like my call to action, I guess, last year I joined a group at my school called Diversity Council, and we're kind of working on bringing awareness to more cultures at our school, because there is like a large white and Asian majority at LASA. And while those obviously are very important to like American culture, there is definitely significant minorities at our school. And I feel like it's really important for those cultures to also be represented. And so we put on events and try and bring awareness. We have a day called Cultural Day where we have speakers from around Austin and surrounding areas that come and talk about their culture or their experiences, or try and bring awareness to the thing that they're passionate about. And we also have conversations with each other about diversity and about representation and about things that matter to us. And this year we're starting something called Town Hall Tuesdays, where we have students from LASA kind of all gather together and ask questions and talk about the issues of diversity within Austin or LASA or kind of around.
It sounds like you have better conversations than most adults have. That's really, I guess it's not saying much, but that's really wonderful. It sounds very mature also. Now, Meena, you've graduated from LASA, and now you're on campus here in the 40 Acres. How has your perspective on this changed in the last year or so?
Oh, man. Well, I guess I'd have to contextualize it, right? So
Please.
I moved to Austin 4 years ago. Like, I started high school here from London, England. And literally the day after I arrived, like, at Austin Airport, Michael Brown got shot in Ferguson. So I sort of went from like, yeah, free healthcare and like only mild racism to we shoot Black people in the streets. And I was sort of just immediately thrust into this world of like, I came here as the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement was beginning. I just didn't know what was going on. Like the culture shock, I feel like, was so much more intense just because of that event and sort of the protests and the riots that followed. So then I came to LASA halfway through my high school career. Like, I came as a junior. So I went from a relatively diverse high school to one, like, as Sophie said, that is primarily white and Asian. I was one of 25 Black people, I think. I mean, I'm mixed, so that's a whole nother identity crisis that I'm not going to get into. But, I mean, the past year, I think being at LASA definitely, I'm not sure if it prejudiced me. It's difficult because, again, being mixed, I'd have a pretty deep connection with both white and Black people, but I simultaneously walk this line of fitting in with neither group.
Right.
And here at UT, I've been trying to find some kind of community where I can be both white and Black and where I can be mixed and be myself. Again, I've been here for, 4 days, so that's been difficult.
Sure.
But
It's a big transition.
Yeah.
How do you engage people in conversations? Because a lot of the things you said very powerfully right now evoke emotions in people, positive and negative, right? You say Black Lives Matter to a police officer or someone whose family is in law enforcement and they have one reaction. And you say it to someone who lives in a largely African-American community and they have a different reaction. So how do you engage other students, faculty, people you meet in these conversations?
I mean, I feel like, especially now, you kind of have to be political, and that's what I do. Like, most of the conversations I have are very rarely like, wow, look at the grass, it's so green outside. It's almost always...
You're a pretty serious person, I can tell. Even though you joke a lot, you're pretty serious.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like some of the most fun conversations and engaging conversations I have are, debates and not arguments necessarily. Like, I don't like to start fights with people, but it's fun to hear other people's opinions or to find someone you agree with, right? Like some of my best friends I've found because we have similar political views and we go to marches together or we're in diversity council together, right? So starting those conversations can be kind of tricky just because, like, my friends say that I'm prone to, like, start race wars in comment sections because I'm always like, Black Lives Matter, and then someone, comes for me and then I go for them, and it's really a whole...
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you actually relish mixing it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty, I think it runs in the family. My brother's the same way, and so is my sister.
Sophie, how do you deal with this in high school? It can be really difficult in an environment, first of all, where you have a lot of academic pressure, as you do at LASA, but also where there's often an expectation that everything you do is supposed to get you to the next step. And if you take on a controversial issue, I remember this in high school myself, there's always a concern, well, will that divert me from the path I'm on? Will someone not admit me to a university because I was part of some activity? Will I alienate someone? So how do you balance these different pressures in high school? Well,
going to LASA, there's people with a lot of different viewpoints. And I think there's a large spectrum when it comes to being, like, the school it appears to be largely democratic with kind of the population of students, but there's a large range of that, and then there's definitely conservatives as well. So we have a lot of classes where discussion is a big part of it, and sometimes we are forced to talk about things that are controversial or difficult for some people, and that can start really almost hurtful conversations sometimes.
Sure, I can imagine.
Because people have viewpoints that others may not agree with, and sometimes it's hard for that not to get out of hand. But I think for the most part, for me, I think it's been really helpful to keep myself educated so that if I'm going into one of those conversations, I'm speaking about my beliefs with data or evidence or something that can help me back up my point.
Right,
and
facts,
I think,
we might call them, right?
Facts, right. And if I'm just going out there with my passion, that's important. Passion is so important when it comes to these issues, or else I wouldn't want to talk about it. But if I don't have like clear facts to kind of back up my argument, then it's just going to be a heated fight. But when it comes to participation, sometimes it's difficult. Like the day I remember after Donald Trump was elected, there was a lot of people that came to school in tears, and teachers were giving kind of speeches and crying or just very upset and trying to mediate what was happening with a lot of the students being upset. But there were also those who were really excited. You know, I remember a boy who went up to one of my friends and tried to provoke her and was really excited about the election and was like, so how do you feel about it? Or tried to make a joke about Trump and things like that. So it's kind of like there's a lot of different people and a lot of different ways to engage. And I think one of the most important ways is by just trying to be active and informed. But also, like, in my high school career, I've participated in a lot of different like marches and things like that. One of which was in Washington, D.C. One was here. And those have been like life-changing moments for me. And it is scary to think that if I go and something bad happens, like what am I going to do?
Right,
you know?
right.
What if someone shows up and like there's violence or
like at the University of Virginia, what happened in Charlottesville.
Yeah. So it's scary to think about that, and it's something I think about every single time I go out to one of those things. Like, what if someone shows up with a gun, you know? Or like the police show up and there's something bad that happens. So
why do you go if you're concerned about that?
I think that showing up for people that I care about and for issues that I care about is the most important thing that I could ever do. And knowing that going to the Women's March and going for the March of Our Lives is to show up for people that I care about. And that is the thing that pushes me to do it every single time. Because marching for the rights of women of all kinds and minorities of all kinds, LGBTQ people of all kinds, you know, that is the most important thing to me. Because if people don't feel like they can be safe, then how is America really free?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And the March for Our Lives, like that affects me every single day. Like I go to school, we have lockdown drills, like relatively often. Last year we had a lot of lockdowns and a lot of like gun scares, and gun violence is something that terrifies me. Like pretty much every day I think about what if something happens, it could be me.
Right. And you're so vulnerable at a school.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think that because I care so much about each of these issues, that they affect me so personally and affect people I care about so personally, that I need to show up regardless of potential danger, because that's, I guess, my civic duty. Right.
I can hear the passion in your voice. Meena, how do you respond to people who say this is all fine, but it's only one side of the story? As Sophie said, right, there are and there should be people who have different points of view, who have different experiences. I certainly remember going to a magnet high school in New York City where then and now whites were a minority. And many people who were from that background and the few conservatives who were there would say, well, our viewpoints aren't being heard and it's not fair. Mm-hmm. How do you respond to that? We hear that at the University of Texas sometimes too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you hear that at LASA also, that not necessarily that conservatives are being oppressed, but that they aren't getting, a huge amount of representation. And for me, I think part of that is living in a fast-growing city, right? I wouldn't necessarily call it big, but it's getting there. Because statistically, liberals flock to cities and conservatives stay rural. And I think there is value to their viewpoints. And I think that it's critical to have different points of view in a conversation, right? Because otherwise it's just enhancing an echo chamber if you're talking to people with the same viewpoints in a room.
Right.
And again, I might not agree with everything conservatives think, but that doesn't mean there isn't value to their opinion and that they shouldn't be heard. It's just difficult sometimes when we've become so polarized in almost any issue that we can talk about, political or not, becomes just a shouting match or some kind of oh, you're stupid because you're liberal, or oh, you hate everyone because you're conservative, right? So there's been, as time has gone on, especially now, there's been almost no room for respectful conversation. And I personally experienced that in one of my classes last year. And one of my teachers, we would try to have conversation with. He was very conservative. He has a reputation for being so at school. And anytime anyone would have or try to have some kind of conversation with anything or debate about what he was saying, they would immediately be shut down or ignored. So that's obviously not the way to do it, because then people feel silenced and then they get mad. And that's not really what we want to happen.
Do you go out of your way to try to develop relationships with people who have different points of view?
I mean, I guess yes and no, because but a very large part of my mother's family is significantly more conservative than my family is, and even my dad's family too, but it's the whole Black conservatism thing, which is kind of a tricky issue, right? But I think because of my sort of international perspective that I sort of developed because of living overseas for so long, most people that I talk to have a slightly different perspective from me, because, for me, things like universal health care, that's kind of just a given. I'm yeah, that's possible. I've seen it work in action.
Right.
Homelessness, pretty easy to cure, because if you have free health care, you can go, fix your broken leg and get treatment for your mental illness. And for some of my friends, some of my best friends, even talking with them about that, they're that's just not realistic, And for me, I feel very passionately like it is. But, on issues like Black Lives Matter, there's some things that I consider non-negotiable. Black Lives Matter, I think that they do. And that's it, if you think not so, I'm not sure we're going to be friends, right?
Sure. So there are certain issues that you need agreement on, but there's still a large space for discussion. And you clearly like to debate, I can tell.
Yeah.
So the last question I want to ask each of you is how you're going to maintain this passion and idealism as you go forward. Because what tends to happen, you've seen this, is one gets involved and excited in these sorts of issues in high school and even in college, but then you go out and you get a job. And you get a family and a mortgage, and you become very professionalized. And we all know lots of people who care but aren't involved. In fact, that's the majority of Americans. It's changed a bit in the last year. In a certain way, our current controversies have provoked people to get more involved, particularly women in many circles. But how are you going to stay involved? How are you going to be successful, as you will be professionally, but still remain involved with these issues? How do you see yourself going forward, Sophie?
I think that it's definitely difficult for a lot of people to be involved, because when it comes to participating in things that are controversial or potentially dangerous, like a march, it's scary to be involved because you have a family to think about, or you have a job to think about. But I mean, my mom is helping out with Beto's campaign here in Texas right now. And I mean, my dad can't vote because he's Canadian, but he's working on it. But I think that as an adult, I hope that my career can be somewhat of a way for me to stay involved. Like, my hope is that maybe I'm not involved in politics, but maybe I'm involved with something to help people and to help.
Like what?
I don't know. I'm still thinking, but a potential option for me would be to work with a group such as like Planned Parenthood or another nonprofit or something to help with the environment, so that the issues that I care about can move forward and can progress. So I think that as an adult, I want to pick a career that can help me stay involved. But I think also as an adult, it would be really important for me to vote in every election, to make sure the people I care about and all the people I know are voting. Even if I don't agree with them, it's still important that everyone votes so that we can actually see what democracy is. Because if only 30% of people are voting, then everything is skewed.
Right. Informed voting is something crucial that's often missing in our society. That's great. Meena, how are you going to continue to change the world while you go and become a rich, successful business person?
Oh man, I wish that were me. No, I think I'm very lucky in that I love writing. Like, it's always been my favorite thing to do. And again, very lucky that I found newspaper freshman year, and that I'm pursuing journalism here, because I think it's critical that me, a Black biracial woman, is, contributing to newspapers, contributing to the media for representation.
Sure.
Mostly, right? Like, you seeing people who are like you inspires you to go vote, right? Like, in the primaries, actually in the primaries, my mom was like, Meena, if you don't vote, like, you're failing democracy. And I was like, oh man, you're right. I can't do that.
Sometimes parents are correct.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. But I think that, if I could forge a path of diversity in the media, right, which I think, again, is changing, like journalism is undergoing a renaissance right now.
Absolutely.
But being a part of that is something that feels like a great privilege to me. And I think that being able to inspire people with my, op-eds and my opinions, and also like my feature stories about like being able to travel and make documentaries, I think is something that visual media is, and audio media is what people consume now, right? Like newspapers, rip in peace, she's dying. Yeah, it's not great. But being a part of that revolution, of this renaissance, is critical for me, for other student journalists. I think young people are definitely forging the path for success. Like, look at the Parkland students, if Emma Gonzalez ran for, in political office, if I could vote for her, I would, right?
Right. No, I think journalism is a incredibly valuable way to raise awareness, and both you and Sophie are going to be important leaders in educating those around you, and you'll do that in all kinds of ways, professionally, informally, in your communities, in your families, and democracy and leadership occurs at the local level in that way. Zachary, what do you think? Are you inspired by our discussion here?
I think so. I'm just excited, looking forward to high school, to like get involved in more things and do more things politically, and just like, I don't know, overall.
What kind of things do you think you want to do in high school?
I have no idea. I just want to like explore all the options and things like that. But I think I have to like go to high school first. I don't really think I can see that.
It's true. You first have to go to high school soon enough. Well, I think today's discussion has been really valuable and inspiring for so many of us to see such smart young people getting involved and to hear the thoughtfulness. What's really been powerful about this to me is it's not a partisan discussion. There are, of course, issues we care deeply about, and their perspectives we bring. To be nonpartisan is not to be without strong views. But I think these are strong views that don't line up with party, they line up with society as a whole. And I think this new generation that Sophie and Meena and Zachary represent is going to be a generation that builds new kinds of coalitions around idealistic goals. So I look forward to having you all back when you are at the next stage in your careers, which I'm sure will be soon. Thank you for spending the morning with us today. And we will continue our discussions on This is Democracy. Thank you.
This podcast is produced by the Liberal Arts Development Studio and the College of Liberal Arts at the University of Texas at Austin.
The music in this episode was written and recorded by Harrison Lemke, and you can find his music at harrisonlemke.com.
Subscribe and stay tuned for a new episode every Thursday featuring new perspectives on democracy.